Hello art lovers, this is Siam from These Tiny Hands Draw, and today we're going to learn how to draw faces. It's a little bit more descriptive than that, but I will be showing tips along the way, as well as the way I normally do things, because I use little tricks myself. The first one that I can suggest is using the lips, because God knows getting a nice even head is difficult, but you always start with a base of an ellipse, like a big circle. And what you can do is bring down the opacity a bit, make it a bit more transparent, and then onto here, draw on your face mold. See what I'm doing here? I don't normally do regular, relatively pointy faces, but this is a way to make sure you got most of the stuff even, and you can get, without having to use the symmetry tools, which you can use as well. They're hidden up here, and it kind of achieves the same function. See? But because I set the center to the screen, it kind of mismatches it. But if you line it up to the center of the face here, it draws it pretty much symmetrically, and it's another way to do it. My favorite version is just using shapes. That way you can use the least amount of mirror tools as possible, because once you try to draw the eyes and stuff, if you try to make them look this way or that way, you could end up with cross eyes. I won't be doing hair in this particular moment because I just want to get the basics of the faces down, because later there will be specific tutorials on hair, eyes, mouth, the works, so you can get a nice detailed description and be able to give different styles as well. Usually where you put the line that marks off where the eyes will be, it can also be determining where in particular they're looking. Because maybe the face is looking a little bit more up or a little more downcast over here. And so you would kind of imagine the eyes over here, looking a little bit more downward. And you could imagine it's just a slight look from above. Like if you were to draw a slightly shorter person, like a child, you could go for this mode if it's from an adult point of view. You get what I'm saying? But right now we're just going to do steadfast, looking straight ahead. And you'll need this center line because it marks off where the nose will be and keeps the mouth in line. Even though they have like tiny quirks and stuff, like maybe it's a little bit asymmetrical, you want to have that baseline to make sure you don't draw the mouth over here. The eyes, most people, my version is a bit more stylized, but usually they do a mark off of there's 3 eyes. 1 eye in the center, 1 eye over here, and 1 eye over here. It's a way of measuring to make sure everything is proportionate to the face. And I recommend you use it as well because it makes sure that your eyes are lined up correctly and make sure there's enough even spacing in between them. Especially if you're not using the symmetry tool, which kind of ensures that you keep them centered, nice and in line. This is a way for when you want to kind of skip out that part. Once you're done, you can just erase this section over here. Get rid of those excess lines and you got 2 nice even eyes. Ears, I learned this a year or so ago, and it's another way to give it a more realistic look, and it is by putting them right under the eyes, is usually where the ears are. Even from like above views and down below views, they're always below the ears, and they also help in showing the angle. If you were to draw them smaller in the downcast view that I mentioned before, it would further demonstrate the view from above look that you were trying to portray. Usually not far up from the eyebrows, no matter the expression. I meant to say eyes. Usually not far above the eyes or the eyebrows. It doesn't matter the expression, but you want to give enough space where you're going to be putting the lids like this, and that also depends on what kind of lid. You could be having more of a hooded inset. There's a word for the ones for the protruding eyes. That's all depending on the kind of eyelid shape that you have for that person. But it usually follows that kind of guideline because not far up here is the hairline, and you want to leave enough eyebrow space for the hairline and the eyebrow. Because if you put them too high up, even though if you're going more of a caricature style, if you want to be giving more uh, of a pronounced, more exaggerated facial expression, then yes, you can put the eyebrow a lot higher. But if you want to go slightly more on the realism side, you want to stick to, I would say, about the width of an eye. If you were to cut this out and match it up, you can see that it's just about the same width. Right set in the middle, usually there's this triangle point right in the eyebrows. This is building up the nose. There's usually this triangle, which is the eyebrow ridge. That's pretty much uniform to every nose. Whether it's pronounced or not is another thing. But hidden underneath all the skin and the flesh, it's going to be in there, and you'll need it for to help map out. And you want to draw like around a diamond, if not triangle shape for the nose, just about this. Because right about here, this is where the tip of the nose would be. These are where the nostrils would be. And this would show just a little bit of the nostrils over here. And that'll give you an idea. This top part would be the nose ridge. Now, depending on what style of nose, you make this part more pronounced or you make it less pronounced. And that would also depend on the shading that you give. You would give more shading here if it's much less pronounced, and give highlighting on the tips of the nose and on the eyebrow ridge. And whether you have the nose ridge more highlighted, you put most of the highlighter here, darken the areas over here. That also depends on where the light is hitting. But that's the basics for, let's say, in a neutral lighting area. If it were a sterile environment, say a camerographer's area, for instance, that's usually how I portray most of my drawings. Like if they were posing for a photo, that's the kind of lighting you would get. So let's say you were to give a basic drawing of a nose here. You got a bit of the form here. That kind of gives you the form. Here's the button. I call it the button of the nose. This would be the top of it. And then we can give this person a nose ridge over here. Nose ridges, you can really shape them any way you want, and that's the fun of it. You can make them individual to each and every person. They never look alike. Later we'll work on pupils, but for now, we're just getting the basics done. And the mouth, usually, if you were to imagine this area in between the eyes, you would keep it about that size. So let's say mouth would be about this size, and if you look, it sort of matches up with these lines. It also depends on the kind of mouth. Some people have wider mouths, some people have shorter. But you have to line them up around where the pupils are. So it would be around this height. Let's give this person a bit of a smile. Always, the part that lines up is the Cupid's bow. Now, the Cupid's bow usually has like these lines that go down from the nostrils. You can imagine that from the inner part of the nostril over here, a line goes down, and then another line goes down. And that usually varies between the width of the nose, sometimes about how high it is. It also depends on the type of lip. If you have a smaller upper lip, then it might not be as pronounced as one with a larger upper lip, but that depends. This one in particular, just for anatomy's sake, we're just having it a bit more pronounced. This person has like an average upper lip, and then we'll do a mild bottom lip. It's about the same size. Usually you do the bottom lip a little bit larger than the upper lip, proportionate wise, and this would be around the shadow of the chin. I always highlight the shadow of the chin because it's part of the attributes that you can control as well. And you also like to mark it out for, let's say, if you don't use line art and instead just go straight into the coloring and rendering, you would like to mark that out in case you forget it, especially with us that have very poor memory, it serves to have that noted down. Pupils. Pupils are also another. They are not all the same to each eye shape. Depending on the eye shape, they'll be either a little more sticking upward, hitting more up here, with an up or with the bottom white showing. Sometimes they'll be touching the bottom. Mine in particular, they touch the bottom. They're called almond. But round eyes, they do not touch the bottom. They would be, no matter if it's looking straight ahead or it's looking up, they will always have that space underneath the eye. And they give a bit of that aloof look. I always found them very dramatic. Not dramatic as in like soap opera, but like in a good way. And they will always have that space. I recommend looking into different eye shapes. It's something I'll teach later, but I always found it fascinating how different eye shapes will have different amounts of white showing, amount of pupil showing, and it's really an interesting feature. Here I'm just drawing the lobes. Really, the lobes are also something you can change around, but as a basic, I always draw this little part that sticks out. I don't know the name of it, but you kind of follow the basal line, a tiny bottom over here, and then the lobes, usually the inner part of the ear, it just goes up to imagination. But there's like a tiny circle over here where it goes right into the ear canal, and then there's a tiny loop over here where people have helix piercings and industrial piercings, just about. Next tip will be neck. We're just kind of doing a bust here. Later I'll be doing full bodies, but the bust, if you have difficulty, first of all, you want to carry down the symmetry line because it'll help. But if you have difficulty in matching up neck shapes or stuff like that, just grab the square tool, this one, go back to the layer where you drew the initial circle over here, and extend the rectangle so that you have even amounts on either side of the line over here, and just use that as a base for your neck. So when you draw it, you switch back to the rough layer. This will be the shapes. When you switch back to the rough layer, you can give this form down from the head. Usually necks, depending on the person, will be around the same width as the head, but slightly less. Sometimes I'll have it the same width. It just depends on the type of person. See, there you got a symmetrical neck. Now it's a basic shape of a rectangle, but the key to making it more realistic is by giving curves, giving transition lines. It's also a way to soften and make the nose bridge more realistic. Just softening the lines, making nice natural curves. Head, the neck, it's usually depends on the person, but just about, you can assume that it's around this measurement. Usually around half the head, if not a little bit more, as a bit of like a starting guide, a nice little suggestion. Shoulders, usually you want to give ample room beyond the head, about maybe like an eye and a half or so of extra space by the ears, just so that there's enough space around here. Some people have broader shoulders, some people have more narrow, and also the shape of them is also very different. Sometimes you have more hanger stoop shoulders, and some people have them a bit more muscular, so you will have the traps over here a bit more noticeable, and then the shoulders popping out a bit more. It always depends on the person. But for sake of argument, we're just doing around like a hanger stoop shoulder for this character. The next are the necklines. Depending, usually some people have them more pronounced, others don't, but for you guys to get an idea anatomically of where they are placed, The necklines and collarbones usually stem from the corner down over here, and then they make a connection from where the traps end to where the shoulders begin. Assume the shoulders begin here, is where the collarbone ends. You can make an estimation that here's the trap, here's the shoulder. You extend the line over here. Here you would have to add some shading. And then sometimes you will get a pronunciation of the bone here, and you would like to add some details. Now, you can either add them with the line art, or you can do with shading, depending on how pronounced they are, for to give a different effect on each person. But that just about concludes our tutorial for the rough sketch. I hope you guys had a good time enjoying this video, and I look forward to seeing you all applying this in your art.